Okay. Next speaker is Melanie Rieback, former NLUUG board member. And I know her for RFID work when she was doing the PhD. And now she will be talking about pentesting.
Thanks. I've got a total soft spot in my heart for the NLUUG. Me and also Walter and a few other people were on the board for quite a few years, and good memories. So anyhow, yeah, great to be here, and I'm happy to talk with you guys today about our pen testing workflow and in particular our use of Chatops. Who here actually knows what Chatops is? Very small number of hands. Okay. I'm hoping to get you guys excited today because it's really at the core of our workflow within Radically Open Security, and I think perhaps the way that we're doing things could be interesting, thought-provoking, and hopefully inspiring to those of you in this room who are also doing security and who are also doing pen testing, but perhaps also for those of you in other areas of IT. So who here has heard of Radically Open Security? Okay, so 2/3 of the room. So I just want to give you a few very small pieces of background information just in the context also of what I'm about to explain. First of all, Radically Open Security is a social enterprise. It's a nonprofit computer security consultancy company, so a bit of a strange business model. I don't really want to talk too much about that today because I don't think it's really relevant to the story that I'm going to tell. But another thing that's weird about us is that, basically we're a network of freelancers and SMEs. So we're literally like a collective of third parties working together as a company. It's actually a very strange way to run a company because most companies, of course, are used to having internal employees with internal contracts. We chose to do it differently, partly because of the whole nonprofit thing. It basically meant we were completely unattractive to any investor of any kind, which meant we had to bootstrap as lean and mean as possible. That's why we started using freelancers in the beginning. It turned out, at a certain point that it was actually a good idea. And of course, now 4 years later, I mean, I'm still the only internal employee and we've got 35 freelancers. So, but anyway, that's not really the point, but the real point is that we're trying to build a company out of movable human resources, essentially, fungible resources, as you could call them. And yeah, it leads to its own particular challenges, but I think Chatops is particularly well suited for structuring that. So, but then that brings us to the question of what is Chatops. So Chatops is a concept that I gratuitously stole from the company GitHub, okay? So what it means is, so GitHub essentially runs their development and their operations from their chat rooms, okay? So how many of you here use some kind of a Slack-like environment? Okay. So we also do, but we don't use Slack, just because as a pen testing company, of course, as the T-shirt says, there is no cloud, there's just other people's computers. So, we're not going to put obviously our customers' pen test data in a third-party cloud. But we use an open source variant of that called Rocket Chat. Who here has ever heard of Rocket Chat? Okay, I highly recommend it for any of you who want a Slack-like environment, but who want to still have governance over your own data. There's also Mattermost, that's another alternative. So, either way, they're both good systems, and they both have also tight integrations and similar APIs to Slack and a number of its add-ons. So it's actually a really cool system. But we make heavy use of a chatbot called Hubot. So Hubot is an open source chatbot from the company GitHub. When I say chatbot, I mean it's sort of very similar to an old school IRC bot. Okay? We all remember these. Except that it's meant for a, more multimedia style, Slack-like style of environment. I think GitHub themselves use Campfire, if I'm not mistaken. But Hubot actually can run in a huge variety of these chat environments, including Rocket Chat, but also Mattermost, also Slack. It doesn't really matter. But the great thing about Chatops is what it does is it actually takes your chat, and it turns your chat into a command line. and this is actually super cool and super powerful. So what it is basically you can create a number of commands. You know, some of those commands can actually be useful for penetration testing, like, for example, things like running scanning tools, for example. It also can be useful for other things like doing your reporting, actually managing entire bits of your workflow, which is how we actually do it in ROS. I'm going to go into more detail in that shortly. But you can see, for example, here I go ROS.pug me, and it spits out a picture of a pug. So completely useless, but it's good for the culture. No, but you know, and we've got a wide variety of commands to do all different kinds of things. So this is an incredibly outdated list, but kind of old screenshot, but nonetheless, it gives you an example of what kinds of things we have. Some of them are really useful, some of them are really useless. Well, we've gotten rid of the shell command one, but it was basically something for input sanitization, which you actually can use. You know, but also you can see other things, like, for example, MD5. You could, for example, you want to take a hash of something, you could basically execute that via the chatbot. You know, but also complete things that are entirely useless, like, you know, mustache me, which can basically, you know, take, you know, photos of people and add a mustache. I mean, you know, again, I mean, it's really a combination of sort of useless culture stuff and useful actual tools that you can use for getting stuff done. So what can we do? So of course, like most pen testing companies in the universe, we have to do reporting. And if there's anybody who hates documentation as much as coders, it's penetration testers. You know, and like every pen testing company in the universe, of course, we've created tools to try and automate away this pain, you know, and try and make this process really as quick and easy as possible. So we developed our own system for doing this that is based upon XML. So you basically fill in these XML templates, and then you compile it into a PDF, basically, with XSLT style sheets, and then using a backend toolchain for that. You know, it could be done other ways. I mean, I know other companies are using LaTeX for that. I found it myself, XML a little bit less fiddly, but nonetheless, you know, we're trying to make it less painful, and this works for us. So, but different people do it different ways, of course. You know, this is roughly how the XML would look. So you can, you know, for example, fill in section IDs and things like that. And if you compile it, then you get a report that looks like this, which basically looks like every pen test report in the universe. You know, you can actually customize the XSLT style sheet with your own logo, your own house style and colors and whatnot. You know, I mean, to use it within your own organization. One thing I should mention about this is we have open sourced everything I'm talking about. So this documentation and workflow system that we've developed is called Pentext, P-E-N-T-E-X-T. Not only have we open sourced it with a GPL license, but we've actually made it an OWASP project. So it's called OWASP Pentext. So check it out. So that being said, of course, for us, it's really nice to be able to invoke this via our chat environment. So what we have, as you can see, first of all, there's this system that we've built that's called Quickscope. So for example, we can go, so I'll have to explain a little bit about our workflow, I think, to discuss what Quickscope is. So in the pen testing workflow, the way that it works is there's sort of a, you know, almost like cradle to grave kind of engagement flow, you know, of work through your company. So it starts, of course, when a customer contacts you and then they say, hey, I want whatever, you know, and then you have to basically scope the work with them. Then you have to, you know, well, match it up with somebody who can do the work. Then you have the actual penetration test. Then you have the reporting. Okay, you deliver the report then. And then, of course, you have the final invoice. Now, the Pentext system that we've developed actually goes through that entire workflow. So what Quickscope is basically just filling in an XML's worth of an A4's worth of XML, which basically just say, you know, these are the targets, this is what we're charging per hour, this is the name of the customer, short name, long name, you know, and this is a quick description of what the test is. We can then go rawspot Quickscope. In this case, we code things usually based on OFF- for, offerte. Yeah, sorry, we are a Dutch company. But for quotations, basically. And we also have PEN- for penetration tests. We also have ROS, as you can see, also for our internal channels, just for our own internal discussion. As you can see, we've had a bit of a proliferation of channels, but that's how it goes. But in this particular case, it's just a demo, so you fill this in, quick scope, okay. The next thing then, what it does is it takes that A4's worth of XML and it expands it into a longer offerte.xml, which if you need to tweak anything really specific, you can. In this case, I don't want to, so then all I do is I type in rawspot build, quote, off Melanie demo. What you can see then is that rawspot invokes the backend toolchain. Okay, and you can see that it's actually calling some Saxon, basically some tools for compiling the document. And then what it does is you can actually see that it spits out a clickable link to the compiled PDF that basically anybody who is in that chat room can then click on. You can also see that by default it's actually password protected, this PDF as well. We can disable that if we want to, but nonetheless, we built that in, of course, for OPSEC. But but what this means is that anybody who has access to this chat room and this particular command can basically build a PDF without actually having the tool chain installed on their own machine. This is actually really powerful, because if you think about it, we're onboarding new staff members, for example, and it means that in the process of onboarding them, they do not need to install anything on their own machines, because they actually are interfacing with our environment purely via their browser. I mean, of course, they have to get through layers of auth to get in, of course. But once they're in, then basically based upon access control lists, of course, which are tied in with their accounts, but nonetheless, then they are given a certain, based on their roles, they're given a certain number of commands that they're allowed to invoke, for example, including quickscope and build quote. And what it means is the entire system administration process is actually centralized on our back-end server. So we've got an IT, our sysadmin and our basically IT and administrator team, which by the way is sort of turning into a bit of a DevOps team, but okay. And they actually then are making sure to keep the entire production infrastructure running. But that eliminates the entire headaches of having to actually fix things on the client side. And that's actually really super sweet and a really nice way of doing it. Another advantage, actually, that having this form of Chatops allows is it actually also, and this is a bit unique to radically open security, we have this workflow that's called peek over our shoulder. So what that means is because we work in chat rooms exclusively, we're a 100% online company, we invite customers to actually join us in the chat rooms. And the nice thing is they can actually listen to every single conversation that the pen testers are having in the course of the engagement. And they can actually even, hack along. They can think along, brainstorm along. And actually, a lot of people would think, isn't it really annoying having the customer there? But actually, it's not. Because actually, it's like having an oracle in your chat room while you're pen testing. And the truth of the matter is, this is actually more useful to us than annoying. Because if we have questions, coming in as a third party, there's always a learning curve, into other people's systems. And if you actually have the developers there and the sysadmins there and the DevOps folks there, if you get stuck on something, you don't have to keep running into that same wall, and you don't have also communications latency with your customer because they're in the chat room with you. So it actually increases, I think, the efficiency of our work probably threefold, because we don't have to sit there and schedule phone calls, and then this person's going to be in a meeting and that person's going to be in a meeting. The nice thing about chat is it's asynchronous. So they can be offline in their meetings, but then they come back and then they can respond quickly and then they can go off into the meetings again. And because it's both asynchronous and synchronous, it's actually really efficient. And the other thing is it also avoids, it allows us really to sync up, and it also avoids surprises. Because, if something is about to go wrong, they can see it coming from a mile away, which is actually great, because if there are problems, it means they can actually brainstorm with us and work with us to fix them and to make the appropriate trade-offs. And this ultimately leads to, I think, a better customer experience, not just in terms of actually helping to transmit knowledge and transfer the mindset, which is part of what the point is, of course, but also because it really positions us in a way that we can work next to them on the same level as partners, rather than, in a typical, slightly more black boxy-ish, form of, vendor, how do I say opdrachtgever? Company, relationship. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of win and a lot of inspiration that can be found, not just for pen testing companies, by the way, but actually for any kind of IT company, because I think also that software companies, it really enables you to have more openness and transparency in your workflow and in your interactions with your customers, which I think for many companies of many kinds actually can offer a whole lot of win that can provide a better customer experience for you, which ultimately, of course, will help your company to become more successful. So yeah, coming back to Pentext, another part of the system that we use heavily is GitLab. So, of course, we have document management needs, just like most companies. So we use purely open software for all of this. So GitLab in this particular case, and you can see right now what the structure of one of our pen testing repos looks like. One of the cool things is, though, is actually with GitLab, we actually also use, for example, GitLab issues for example, documenting stuff. And we've got that hooked up to the chatbot. So part of the peek over our shoulder concept is every single time there is an update to a GitLab issue, for example, taking notes during the course of a pen test, or anytime there's a push to that particular repo, for example, if you push scan results, for example, then the chatbot actually announces, this pen tester just made an update to this issue at this timestamp. Click here to view it. Which actually means that while the pen testers are working, the customers are actually getting updates on what they're doing, like probably a few times an hour. And that's completely outside of the actual conversation that they're having with each other in the chat room. What this means is it enables us to continuously keep the customer updated for free, because it actually costs us no extra effort, because we're pushing stuff into GitLab anyway. But this is the nice thing about that chatbot. It really, in a way that costs much less work, really makes that kind of stuff transparent and visible, and that's really super cool. Another thing with our workflow also in the use of Git repos is basically we can start with a quotation repo, and then when we actually have a command that's called start pentest. And what start pentest does is that it actually literally will clone the quotation repo into the pentest repo, carrying along those details, which is actually really nice because, also again, then in the template with the pentest report, you don't have to fill those things in again because it was taken from the original quotation repo. Similarly, there's another command called rawspot invoice that generates the final invoice, also based on what was in the quotation repo. So again, there's a lot of streamlining and automation that we can put into this, and all of this is really invocable from the command line, or from the chat room, So passive vulnerability scanning tools, I'm sure all of you probably are familiar with Shodan and Census and these kinds of tools. This is we also created at some point a passive vulnerability scanning tool that aggregates a few of these things. Another perfect example of the kind of thing that is invocable via the chatbot. But there's so many of these things. This is one of my favorite things. It's called red-blue pentesting. So what we do is we actually gamify, in some cases, pen testers, basically gamify customers' pen tests. So what we can do is we can actually take the development team, plus sysadmins, plus DevOps folks for a particular product or environment. Then what we can do is, let's say there's a dozen of them, we can split them into two teams. It can either be a red team, or it could be a red team, blue team. We've done it both ways. Each team is then run by one of our professional pen testers. And then what we do is, in the course of, for example, 3 days to a week, we actually let the developers perform a pen test on their own product. You know, if they get stuck, we've got the professional pen testers to give them ideas. You know, but the truth is, I mean, they have the deep technical knowledge, because they're the developers, to actually be able to carry out a fairly deep pen test on their own stuff anyway. But on top of it, it actually also disbands the hostility that you sometimes have, you know, coming in as a third party and saying, you're doing it wrong, you know. Then they're like, what? No, we're not, you know, or it doesn't matter. Or, you know, they'll trivialize it or, you know, be hostile to it in some way. But the thing is, if they hack their own stuff, they are proud. And they're like, oh my God, I did that, you know. And the #1 comment that we get from these exercises is, and I quote, I will never look at coding the same way again. You know, and this is why we do it, you know? And yeah, I mean, honestly, it barely costs more than a standard pen test in such a way to both train a dozen people and, you know, to perform an extremely thorough pen test, because of course, at this point now you have a dozen eyes and a dozen brains that are busy looking at this. You know, so, and really all it cost was the, you know, 3 days to 5 days times 2 pen testers of our time, and of course, you know, a few extra days just to fix, you know, a mess they made of the reporting. But, you know, but nonetheless, you know, it actually is a really smart way to do things. And I think that, you know, it's right now we're the only ones, I think, that are doing this. But, you know, again, these tools are available for free. This is all open source, you know, and I think it would be absolutely awesome if other pen testing companies also started doing this kind of thing. Because, again, I mean, it's pen testing and training in one. It doesn't cost that much. They love it. Total win, you know. But as you can see, though, that this is facilitated by the chatbot. You can see, for example, that we built some special commands for a scoreboard in our chat environment. So you can see here that we have a command that's called good job. So you can see here I type in good job blue, and then the bot says incremented blue 24 points, and then it spits out this motivational image. So, you know, and geeks love that. So, you know, but this, again, this is just an example. And you can see also the way that the, you know, conversation is also surrounding that. So it really integrates that game sort of seamlessly into the actual code and the operations that we're executing. So, super. So what else can we do with the chatbot? I mean, really, the possibilities are endless. You know, all of the standard kinds of hacking tools and scanning tools that we use can be integrated. Okay, not all of them. It's a little harder with Burp Suite, but you know, but certainly a large number of them can be integrated into the chat environment. Things like Nmap, for example, we've made it as such that we can actually launch an Nmap scan from the chatbot, and of course that exports to XML. We can literally snip out the appropriate pieces of that scan output and then drop it into pentext in the correct place so it gets compiled into the PDF where it needs to be. Win, you know? I mean, this is actually really powerful stuff. Other scanning tools that we are working on with the tooling, but they're not quite as far along as Nmap, but still. But web scanners, for example, like W3AF, this kind of stuff, you know, perfect. SQL map, I mean, this also, command line based, can be invoked. Password cracking, you know, Hydra. We implemented rainbow tables. You know, and we can basically call this from the chatbot, and then it has the rainbow table on the back-end server, and it can then, you know, crack the hash and then spit the output back into the chat room again. I do this actually with demos, in my trainings also all the time. Super cool. And what's actually even more impressive is I can actually also access Rocket Chat via my cell phone, again, with appropriate auth. But at the same time, what this means is I can use rainbow tables on my cell phone. I mean, how cool is that? Seriously. So, anyway, other kinds of reconnaissance that you might want to do, so things like Whois, you know, Google, you know, let me DuckDuckGo that for you, you know, take your pick. You know, passive scan, I mentioned that earlier. Hash cracking, I just mentioned. Spear phishing. We also built this really awesome spear phishing toolkit that is also open source, by the way, that also interfaces with our chatbot environment. So imagine this. We had an engagement about, I don't know, a month and a half ago with a hosting provider who will not be named. So we're basically busy with a fake login form, trying to harvest credentials. But the nice thing is, with the chat environment, we invited the security officers to join us in the chat room. Now we have it as such that we can build pretexts by using a chat command to scrape a particular website and instrument that with links, to our web server. We then, via the REST API, can tie this web server into our chat environment. So every single time somebody interfaces with our phishing page, we can inject, a notification into the chat room that this, sender email, this recipient email address just clicked on this pretext name at this timestamp. So you can literally, the security officers from the company are sitting in the chat room, and they are sitting there watching people in their company get phished in real time. And this is really a lot of fun. And we also did this for filling in forms. So at a certain point, of course, people started filling in forms. So you can actually sit there and watch, the usernames, passwords. We do sanitize it with stars, also in the chat room, But what's actually really funny is at a certain point, one of the coders at the hosting provider, so one of the techies actually figured out that the domain wasn't entirely kosher. So because we were using a special character in there, and it was noticed. So at a certain point, the techie started playing around with the form. So at a certain point, we started seeing entries in our chat room. Username, nice try, assholes. Password something else. Username, woohoo. Password, SQL injection. That was my favorite one ever. No, it didn't work, but the guy got points for trying. So, of course, at the same time, of course, the question is, was he doing this from a properly sandboxed environment? But the thing was, by the time it was over, the security officers were like, man, we're going for lunch, but thank you. That was really entertaining. And again, this is like the really nice thing about working from this chat environment. It really enables so many modes of operation with the customer that I think would be near impossible, to have without it. And that's, why I'm so excited about this. Of course.
So how about username and then Rosbot shell?
Yeah, exactly. Trust me, I have some pen testers at my company trying to hack this all the time. And sometimes we can hack it. We actually have made a number of improvements in our code. We've actually found some 0 days that we've reported to Rocket Chat, for example. But we've actually found a few things in our Chatops, and we're continuously improving it. So, but you're right. No, it's absolutely awful, I have to say. We used to work together, we don't anymore, but with Peter Geisler. I'm not sure how many of you guys know Blasty. And one of the very first things he tried in our chat environment was, when we first set up Rosbot, was Rosbot image me goatsy. I'm not going to explain this, but but this is what you get when you work with hackers. So anyway. But the funny thing is, though, that when you work in such a chat environment, and this is sort of the basis of your company, what it means is that this infrastructure is production, okay? If my chat environment and my Chatops goes offline, my entire company goes offline. So this puts really particular demands, of course, on our administration, and also on our development processes. And I really view radically open security as a DevOps company. That's actually a highly unusual thing, I think, to say for a security company. But at a certain point, this is the way that we have to start treating it. Because again, if there's an outage, this affects everything. So, in that sense, we have been, adding unit testing for absolutely everything. We have been adding continuous integration and continuous deployment, to our pipelines. We have been, also working on adding Docker containers, for easing deployment and being able to create new working environments and then destroy them again. And of course, this is also really important for GDPR and these kinds of things as well. So, and that, of course, for us, we've got this huge refactoring project going on right now, and it's very much a work in progress. Anyway, but other things, really our entire company, our entire, makes use of this Chatops. So project management, of course, every company has project management needs. We use the CAN board. I have to say we're in the process of migrating to get that to GitLab, because GitLab also has a Kanban board. When we first created it, it didn't have that yet. But nonetheless, but we've got tooling that basically makes it so that from the chat bot, we can actually both view the status of projects on the CAN board, but we can actually also make updates to the CAN board, just by using the chat bot. In fact, we've got something else that can actually update the CAN board as a side effect of doing other things. Let me explain. So we've got this one particular command that's called rawspot shipit. Does anybody know the shipit squirrel here? Nobody? Sort of. One person. OK. So the shipit squirrel is one of the most useless Hubot commands ever. You basically go, ship it, Hubot ship it, and it gives you a picture of a squirrel. That's it. And it gives you a different squirrel every time, and sometimes the squirrel is wearing armor, and sometimes the squirrel is, in a tree looking cute, and, whatever. It's just, but it's a way to celebrate shipping stuff. And of course, every company ships stuff, or at least hopefully you do. So, it's a way of kind of celebrating that, yay, we just finished something. Now, we've made it so that if one of our pen testers, for example, just ships a pen test report, they can go rawspot ship it. It gives them the squirrel. We all feel good. And then it takes the CAN board item, and it moves it to done. It's good for helping to, make sure that lazy pen testers who have no interest in updating things like CAN boards, to make sure that that kind of still gets done. We also built our own help desk, like support desk kind of software, this thing called Git Notes. That also, for example, we've created magic email addresses, basically, that are related to the project name and the assignment name. And then basically, if you then CC or BCC this special email address, then the way that it works is, A, it will inject a copy of this email correspondence into GitLab. And then the second thing it will do is it will actually inject a chat message via the chatbot into the chat room, so that basically it can say, you just received correspondence from this sender with this subject, at this timestamp. Click here to see the email correspondence. Now, the reason why this is actually really nice is because we do assignments for larger companies, some of which give us many projects, at the same time. And the thing is, their security officers want to be on top of the communication we're having with their individual business units, because there's a lot going on. So they want us to loop them in. But the nice thing is, what we can do is we have, first of all, for creating new channels for this particular customer, we actually can, first of all, auto-add the security officers to their own channels, that first of all. And once the security officers are in there, because of this Git Notes mechanism, as long as we're using these special email addresses, on our correspondence, they literally see, these injected notifications of basically every single piece of correspondence that is sent, as long as that email address is CC'd or BCC'd. And it costs us no extra work to do this, but the security officers are constantly kept up to date on everything that's happening. And again, it costs us zero extra effort to do this. This is the power of Chatops. Other things that we do, maintaining billable hours. Everybody hates recording billable hours, but we've made it as painless as possible. We've created a command that's called rawspot charge. And what rawspot charge does is, if a penetration tester is working on something, the pen tester can basically type into the chatbot rawspot charge n for the number of hours, and then a description of what they're doing. Based on the channel that they type this into, it gets recorded, in the database in the proper place. And then rawspot then says, thank you, name of pen tester. You have now registered, n hours for this pen test with this description. And then it gives you a progress bar and says, you have now used, n plus m hours out of the scoped P, hours, for this pen test. You are now finished with, 35% of this pen test, and it literally gives you this progress bar showing you then the 35%. This is nice because I mean, it basically just allowed the pen testers to declare the hours as painlessly as possible. It's one chat command, which means they'll actually do it. And the second thing also is it's actually nice because remember, the customers in the channel, so they see the pen testers constantly declaring the hours, like I spent 3 hours on this, I spent 2 hours on that, I spent 4 hours on that. So they know exactly where their money is going. Because time is money, of course. You know, and the truth is, I mean, customers experience this as extremely pleasant. We've also got something built into RawSpot. It can actually make an announcement. You have now reached the 50% point of this pen test. Perhaps now is a good time to initiate, you know, the halfway point discussion. And basically, at the halfway mark, we always evaluate with the customer, you know, this is what we scoped, you know, this is the number of hours that we spent, this is what we actually did, you know, there's this many hours left, this is what we haven't done yet, you know, maybe it turns out we, you know, underscoped it. And yeah, in that case, you know, dear customer, can you help us prioritize what we do in the second half to make sure that actually the things that are most important to you get done? It helps us because it prevents cost overruns, you know, from overwork, and it also helps them because it means the stuff they care about most actually gets, you know, gets done. So it's win for all sides, you know, so that's why this is a super good thing. Yeah?
Customers having almost real-time access to that spend.
Yeah.
If you have overscoped,
Yes.
do you have customers kind of getting a little bit antsy, and how do you manage that?
You know, I mean, it depends on how much it's overscoped. If it's just a tiny overscope, I don't mind working a few extra hours and not charging them. I mean, in that sense, we're pretty easygoing about that kind of thing. If it's grossly, you know, underscoped in that, you know, it would suddenly double or triple the length of the engagement. You know, I mean, obviously, look, I mean, scoping is an art, not a science, and occasionally we get it wrong. And, you know, it's also not their intention to put us out of business. So most of the time, if it's a really gross error in the scoping, sometimes things are bigger than we thought, sometimes things are more complex than we thought. It is the nature of the beast, and, you know, generally they accept this as long as we're being open about it and reasonable about it. Yeah, but for smaller errors, I don't usually charge them. Okay, role-based access control. So I mentioned this briefly, but this is of course extremely necessary because I don't want my customers launching scans, you know, against other people. You know, that's not the intention. And trust me, my customers try. I regularly have customers, and the first thing they think is, oh, we're going to try to hack this. So, you know, so we need role-based access control for this. We also are attempting to actually right now move our company over to holacracy. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that particular management style, but it's actually, it's a form of management that is very compatible to RBAC, actually, in that you work in a number of circles, and then there's a number of roles within the different circles, and then people can basically take on whichever roles they want to, perform that work for a little while, and then they can actually drop the roles if they feel like it, and then take up other roles. They actually have total freedom to do this. So it's kind of like a decentralized management methodology, you know, and we're literally working with a holacracy coach right now trying to sort of formalize that and make it better. But this actually ties in then really well with RBAC, because then you can have basically you know, roles for, you know, the role descriptions, also certain roles for you know, the work within the particular circles. You can have a pen tester circle, you can have a tech writer circle, you can have a project manager circle, you know, these kinds of things, IT and infrastructure, and that's actually really really super. So. Similarly, error logs, you know, because we're sort of DevOps and R&D heavy, you know, I've got a number of developers, you know, working pretty much full-time, you know, on, well, actually not full-time, that's not allowed, but at least working much part-time, you know, on, on developing all this infrastructure, because as you can imagine, this is a lot of work. You know, we have to invest a lot of time and a lot of money into building all of this. So, you know, and that being said, stuff like error logs, we actually have channels that are nothing more than piping error logs into chat rooms. What this means is that our developers can actually see the error logs at any time without logging into the server. It actually means that we've got some, you know, developers who do not need shell on our servers. win. And this is really nice. And we've got channels both for debug logging as well as for error logging. You can also pipe web server logs. Again, the possibilities are endless. Help menu, so we've built kind of a man pages style help menu, because of course once you start having so many chat commands, you need to know what they are and what the syntax is. So we've built kind of a man pages sort of for the chat commands. So we've got that too. And what else can we do? I mean, it's endless. I would love to find a master's student at some point and to look into like AI chatbots, for example. I know this is extremely buzzwordy, but the truth is, imagine where we could take it if we could use a chatbot to help, for example, with answering frequently asked questions or to help with onboarding new people. Why not? It's just a matter of getting the bot, I think, to follow choose your own adventure style scripts, and to be able to answer things out of a particular knowledge base that you build. I actually don't think it would be that hard to implement. Similarly, with asking, conducting surveys. Everybody hates customer satisfaction surveys. At least I know I hate them. And if I receive them by email, I always throw them away because I never fill them in. I'm too lazy. But the truth is, imagine if you could use the chatbot at the very end of an engagement to actually ask a few questions at the end about, hey, were you satisfied? Generally that's annoying if that's happening automatically, but remember that there's also humans in this chat room. So you can then use the bot to then facilitate the actual discipline of doing the asking, but then you actually have humans who can step in there, if the customer says something that you weren't expecting. And again, I think there's a whole lot of win. You could do the same thing, for example, with staff evaluations and also similarly surveying your staff about their satisfaction. And again, this is sort of stuff that I want to build, but I'm still looking for maybe a student or something that can help, since this is kind of researchy. Yeah, so I think that a lot of what we've done with this Chatops actually is kind of changing the way that pen testing is done. Because, yes, of course, some companies out there are also very open, in their own ways, and they certainly try to be. Not every pen testing company acts like a big black box corporate. Some of them are there, but there's also a number of smaller players that are doing great work in the most open way possible. Well, this is an even opener way, and this is possible. I'm actually, and what I really am kind of proud of, I'm talking with the NCSC right now about actually adding peek over our shoulder into their pen testing guidelines as yet another, form of pen testing. You've got black box, you've got crystal box, and you've got peek over our shoulder. Why not? We've already served over 60 customers this way, And for the rest, what's validated this is we have won a ton of awards, for our work and our workflow and our business model. The Dutch Chamber of Commerce called Radically Open Security the 50th most innovative SME in the Netherlands. I'm proud of that. Similarly, we have won also other awards. We've won multiple innovation awards, some for nonprofit projects that we've worked on. For example, the NetAid Kit, completely open source Wi-Fi Tor router for 25 euros, that we did with Free Press Unlimited. That's a completely different talk. Also, some of our Sprout Challenger 50 from Sprout Magazine. So also some research-related things. And also, CIO Magazine actually called me the most innovative IT leader in the Netherlands of this past year, which is kind of crazy. But it's not about me. I think it's actually more validating a number of the really weird things that we're doing and the really weird way that we're doing it in. I think, first of all, the whole concept of a nonprofit company, of course, I didn't spend that much time talking about it today because that's not what this talk was about. But we're actually busy right now setting up a brand new project called Nonprofit Ventures, which is aiming to create a kind of incubator, take that word with a grain of salt, but for helping other nonprofit company startups to get off the ground. Because I think that this is actually a super cool concept, and I think that this is actually the thing that the world needs, sort of more non-commercial, commercial options that then can bring some disruption into the market and can also try and optimize for doing things, the most, in the best socially best way possible, but then also financially standing on its own 2 feet. So that's cool. Yeah, but it also, of course, validates how weird we are, I mean, the fact that we have 1 employee and 35 freelancers, the fact that we're completely online and have no office, and also with the chat ops and all the weird stuff that we're doing. I mean, I think that right now, the fact that we're winning all these awards, but also, we're already a preferred vendor for Google. How many Dutch pen test companies can say that? I mean, again, I have mixed feelings about that one too, but nonetheless, But we also do open source audits with the MOS project. We also do a lot of work with the Open Tech Fund, and we also do cost price work for NGOs and civil society, which I should also mention. Anyway, enough about that. I'm happy to answer any further questions. I hope that you guys found this thought-provoking, because I think a lot of these concepts and ideas could be applied to your own businesses. And again, everything I mentioned today is completely open source. I not only encourage you, but almost practically beg you guys, please try what we're doing. Adopt our stuff. It's open source. It's freely available. And of course, Ross would be more than happy also even to assist you. It doesn't matter if you guys are competitors of our company. Doesn't matter. We're happy to actually help you to adopt, these kinds of workflows, because I think they're better, and I think ultimately the world needs to be more open and transparent. So thank you so much. Are there any questions? No? Okay, I'll be here all day, so feel free to ask later. Thank you.